Bringing a fresh new perspective on the challenges and issues that face our criminal justice system and their impact on all New Yorkers, this is Justice Matters with your host, President of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association, Patrick Cullen.
Good afternoon to all our listeners here on AM 970 The Answer. My name is Patrick Cullen, and I am the President of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association, representing the best court officers in the nation. It's a pleasure to welcome you back to Justice Matters, a show that highlights the very important role our court officers play in maintaining safety and security in our state Supreme Courts throughout New York City and the Ninth Judicial District. Before we get to our guest today, I'd just like to touch on a few issues and developments since our last episode. There have been so many changes in the justice system taking effect now and in the near future. It is so important to our union and our members to highlight what is happening. During our previous run of shows, we had meaningful discussions about our workplace, the benefits we provide our members and retirees, impactful legislative measures, both positive and negative, pension updates direct from the state controller, and some of our charitable endeavors. During our hiatus recently, two things became very obvious. Number one, these matters featured on our show continue and they demand more of a spotlight, especially in an environment that focuses less and less on these types of issues. And number two, the positive impact that this program has had on our membership. I've been overwhelmed by the support and enthusiasm for continuing to produce this content for our members, emphasizing our very difficult profession, the challenges it presents in a system that often overlooks it. Add to that some new concerns, and it became clear that Justice Matters has never mattered more than it does today. There is so much discussion on crime and criminal justice these days, including raise the age of criminal responsibility legislation, bail reform, and the recent proposal to consolidate the entire New York State court system. All of these initiatives, no matter how you feel about them, demonstrate without question how critical the staffing levels we have fought for through our campaign for safer courts and its definitive success are to providing safe courts as we embark on the most historic and dramatic changes to the largest judicial system on the planet. And so we continue the mission set forth for us here on AM 970, The Answer, which has always been to inform our members and the public of the complicated nature of our job, the state of labor in New York, and laws affecting us by discussing directly with those figures involved with these aspects of our profession. We will focus on legislative issues in today's episode, and it is true what they have said in the past, that all politics is local. And joining us to kick off the show, a person who has demonstrated that clearly, both in Albany and now as a candidate for Yorktown Town Supervisor, Mr. Matt Slater. Matt, thanks for joining me here on Justice Matters.
Pat, thanks so much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be on the show, and can't thank you enough for your incredible support and support of your organization, both in the past and today.
That's great, Matt. And so before we dive into some issues in the race that you're running now, just give us a quick introduction of yourself to the listeners. Tell us about yourself a little bit and the path that led you to become a candidate for Yorktown Supervisor.
Yeah, no problem. Well, again, my name's Matt Slater. I was raised in Yorktown, where I'm raising my family right now, which is great. I've got my little guy just celebrated his 4th birthday yesterday. My little guy Charlie. And my wife, Kelly, and I also have a 6-week-old little girl, Elizabeth. And, I always felt that public service is an incredible calling. And being able to help your neighbors, being able to stand up for what's right, takes a lot of courage and a lot of guts. And I always admire people who were willing to do that. And so I always felt the calling to public service. And so my entire professional life, I've been dedicating to helping my community. I've worked in the state legislature, both houses of the legislature, in the Assembly and the Senate. So I've got over a decade's worth of experience in state and local government. Last 4 years, I was proud to serve as Chief of Staff to State Senator Terrence Murphy, who represented the 40th Senate District in the Hudson Valley. We went from as far north as Beekman in Dutchess County, all the way down to Valhalla in Westchester County. And listen, at this point, we my wife and I had the very frank conversation. We can either, pick up the flag and stand tall and fight back, or we should have the conversation about finding, a different place to raise our kids. And like I said, I was raised in the town that I'm raising my kids in. My mom still lives in the house that she raised me in. So we've got a vested interest in the future of our town. We believe in our town. We believe in the community that we call home and all of its values and the people who live there. And so we decided let's get in the ring and let's try to fight back.
That's terrific, Matt. And it's always great to hear people looking to give back to the very community that started them off. I always find something, regardless of the political arena, which side of the line you stand on and those types of things, the fact of somebody believing in the place that brought them up and giving back to be able to not only raise their own families but help their neighbors, really make their community better. And I think that there's nothing more noble than exactly what you just said. Let's make the place that made us happy. Let's continue to make it a great place to live and raise a family. And for those of you who don't know, your town is in Westchester County. I think we oftentimes look at what our union does as representative only of New York City, but we represent the 5 counties north of the city as well. And so that's why it's important. We have a lot of members who live in Yorktown, Matt, and so that's why it's such a great pleasure to have you on. We don't want to always just focus on such a big picture, the front page of the newspaper. We want to get into the where our members live, and that's why it's so important that I thought it was to have you come on today. This is your first stint at running for office, and I just was curious, how does your prior experience working for Senator Murphy benefit you in this race?
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, when I was in the Senate, we represented 22 municipalities in the state Senate. We represented over 300,000 people. And so I saw and I had to interact with people from both sides of the party, elected officials from both sides of the party, from different regions with different priorities. And I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. And local government is where the rubber meets the road. You see in Albany, and I'm sure we're going to get into it, they can pass all the policy they want and all their, genius ideas. But when it comes to implementation and how it directly impacts everyday families, the hardworking families who are struggling right now with the crushing tax burden that they're facing, especially in Westchester County where I live, that's where the rubber meets the road. And that's where the implementation, really takes hold. And you see the direct impact it has on people and their everyday life. And so, having the experience of being in the Senate as a staffer, as a chief of staff for Senator Murphy, I saw firsthand, how the sausage is made, so to say. But at the same time, I understood and worked with our local officials to see what that real impact was. And like I said, I'm sure we're going to get into it, but there's a lot of things going on, up in Albany these days that really are going to have a major impact on the everyday life of our residents. And so I think that if we bring some fresh ideas, some new ideas to the table, we modernize how our town operates. We make it more efficient, more effective, and friendlier to the taxpayer. I think that's how we can really make a difference.
I couldn't agree with you more, especially even as a Westchester County resident myself. The 40th Senate District, which you were the chief of staff for Senator Terrence Murphy there, really, in my opinion, has always been really the swing district in the entire Senate for a long period of time. Now, we're looking at a much different way of doing things in Albany now, and I want to focus more on your candidacy. But, it's such a diverse district, and so much gets done there. And quite frankly, there's been a large amount of turnover in that Senate district. I can't speak enough to the open door policy, the results-based outlook that you and the senator and the entire staff there extended not just to my group, but to all of the law enforcement professionals that represent people by way of labor unions. So if you just could, just to rewind the results that you found important and necessary to try and procure and secure for our brothers in blue throughout the Senate district up there in the 40th.
I mean, the number one thing that I think we did really well with, and I think is critically important, and unfortunately has not continued, is the thyroid cancer screening and thyroid awareness that we're working with, especially regarding our 9/11 first responders. There's a distinct the statistics are clear that there's a distinct increase in thyroid cancers relating to those who were on the pile in the days following 9/11, in the days and weeks and months following 9/11. And working with Senator Murphy, Senator Golden, we were able to secure $250,000 twice in state funding to provide free thyroid cancer screenings to any first responder who was on the pile. Fortunately, but unfortunately, those screenings actually saved lives, and because you had individuals who did get diagnosed with early stages of thyroid cancer from those free screenings. And most people don't even realize that there's a direct link between thyroid cancer and being on the pile. So that was one of the greatest things that we did, I think, specifically for law enforcement, on a macro level. And again, unfortunately, it was not renewed in the state budget, in this past state budget, which is very disappointing. Then in addition, I can bring it back home to Yorktown again. We helped expand the K-9 unit in Yorktown. As you know, we have an opioid epidemic that continues to ravage the state of New York. We were able to secure critical funding from the state to add an additional K-9 officer to the police force in Yorktown, which is in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best, police force in Westchester County right now, and I say that proudly. And so it's just keeping up with all the issues. Like you said, we had an open door policy, especially when it comes to anyone who puts on a uniform, whether it's a military uniform, a first responder uniform. Open door policy. We have to roll out the red carpet for anyone who's willing to risk their lives to protect our families and save our families. And that's just our mindset. And, right now, and Pat, you know this better than anyone, right now, that mindset is not shared by decision makers, right, up in Albany and elsewhere. And it's making things very challenging. I tell, folks from law enforcement all the time, I don't know how, personally, I hope, right now, the way that things are and the level of disrespect that we see out there for anyone who puts on a uniform, I can only hope that it changes. And, I look at my son, like I said, he turned 4 yesterday. And, we're teaching him the importance and meaning and value of our police officers, of our law enforcement, of our first responders. But unfortunately, I don't think those, that's being as wide, those teachings are as widespread as they should be. And so just having that respect and acknowledgement and recognition, I think it's critical for our community. And I can tell you that up in Yorktown, that's exactly how we feel. It's a very, very police and fire-oriented community. We have got folks from almost every police force that you can imagine, from the NYPD to Yonkers to White Plains, and so it's just maintaining that level of respect. And from our standpoint, the very least we could do was have an open door policy to make sure that you got what you needed. If there was anything that we ever needed to do for you, we were more than happy to accommodate.
Yeah, Matt, listen, I think that's a good jumping off point. If you'll stay with me through a break, I think we can get into maybe a little bit more specifics about that. Also, some of the issues that you're facing in this race and some of the endorsements you've received. So stay with me. Justice Matters will be right back after this message.
We return now to Justice Matters with the president of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association, Patrick Cullen.
Welcome back to Justice Matters. We're going to continue our conversation with Matt Slater, candidate for Yorktown Town Supervisor. Matt, what are the three biggest issues that you're in this race that you're running, and what do you think Yorktown residents might be most concerned about?
The biggest issue by far is the affordability issue that we're grappling with. I mean, I can tell you that I've knocked on doors, met with families, and you've got folks who should be on the verge of retirement, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but instead they're working two jobs.
Right.
Two jobs. The husband's working two jobs, or the wife's working two jobs,
right,
just so they can keep their roof over their head. I mean, it really is a major issue that we have to figure out. I mean, I can tell you that just in the last year, the county sales tax increase has gone up 13%. The town raised our water rates by 14%.
Yeah.
Taxes have gone up, and spending's up $1 million. That's just in the last year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just really unsustainable. And then if you look at beyond that, we're trying to battle NYSEG, who wants to raise our utility rates by 23%. I mean, it's got to end. I mean, it's just unsustainable. So affordability is the biggest issue. Economic development is a major issue in town. We everything's stopped. Our business centers are dying.
Right.
There's just no confidence. There's just no confidence that you can walk into town hall and your project's going to go from A to Z with as little obstacles as there should be. And so I think economic development is another major issue. And then obviously the opioid epidemic is still raging in not just Yorktown but the Hudson Valley. Again, our police department does a phenomenal job. They really do. They're on top of it. But we have to stay vigilant. We have to be forward thinking and find additional ways and new partners to continue that mission of ending that epidemic.
Yeah.
And those are three of the biggest things I think that our town is facing. And of course I always like to put a plug in for our local lakes and our parks. Our local playgrounds really need some TLC, and our lakes as well. So those are also the things that I'm looking to tackle when I get in next year.
Yeah, those are all terrific, initiatives, and I think probably issues in any local race being run right now is affordability. If you can't sustain or provide the people who make up a community an environment for them to thrive and to feel confident and to send their children to good schools and to have safe playgrounds and places to shop, and quite frankly, you talk about business centers and where are teenagers going to work these days? Those types of things,
Right.
retail, the local ice cream shop, those types of things. They're disappearing. They're disappearing in places like Yorktown, which has always been a wonderful place to live and still is. But when you see like the local dry cleaner and the local ice cream place, et cetera, disappear, that's part of the community eroding. And I'm so proud of you for taking up that mantle. Instead of, standing on these giant issues, you're focusing on the things that are really important to the men and women who own homes in your own community and are looking to raise their families the way, like you said, you were raised in the very same community. So I just really applaud you for that.
I appreciate that, Pat.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell us about some of the endorsements you've received for your candidacy.
Oh, well, I got to tell you, I never thought I'd run for office. I mean that sincerely. I used to tell people
Every candidate says that.
Yeah, I used to tell people I was crazy, not stupid, and and here I am doing this crazy thing. But I got to tell you, the response has been amazing, and the support has been incredible. I'm the first supervisor candidate in the town of Yorktown to be endorsed by the New York League of Conservation voters in more than 4 years,
wow.
And a lot of that has to go towards my work in the Senate with Senator Murphy, but also my vision for our future, my commitment to, again, going back to the lakes issues, the parks issues. Those are all big things that we need to tackle, and I already have plans to do that within my first 30 days in office. Law enforcement, I get chills. I get chills when I talk about all the support I've gotten from law enforcement on the state level, on the county level, on the local level. It's been amazing. It really has been, including not just law enforcement but fire. We were endorsed by the Lake Mohegan Professional Firefighters. I think I'm the first supervisor candidate to land that endorsement in at least the last 10 years. I don't ever remember them endorsing a supervisor candidate.
Wow.
Since I've been involved, and it's just humbling. It's just humbling
Sure.
because, like you said, it's a tribute to the work we've already accomplished, but also the values that we share and our vision going forward. And there's, like I said to you before, there's a lot of people in our community, who put on that uniform every single day to protect our families, and to have their support. And I'll say it, I believe that everyone who puts the uniform on is a hero. And I teach my son, and I'm going to teach my daughter the same thing. But to have the support of our local heroes is probably the most humbling experience of this entire journey. And I just hope I get the opportunity to prove what we can do and make them proud.
And so do we. Can you tell us really quickly where we can find more information about your campaign before Election Day on November 5th?
Yeah, check out my plan. I've got a plan for our veterans. I got a plan for our environment, our community. It's www.slaterforyorktown.com. Hop on there, check out the plan. You can see all the things that we're doing on the campaign trail. We're all over the place, working every single day, and we're not going to stop. We got 3 weeks from today is Election Day, and the polls close at 9:01, and I won't stop until 9:02. So
excellent, Matt.
I can't thank everyone enough for their support.
Thanks again for coming on the show, Matt. We're so proud to support your campaign, and we will do all that we can to help you win on November 5th. Thanks again.
Pat, thank you, and thank you for the support. Appreciate it. Stay safe.
Justice Matters. Be right back after this message.
Welcome back to Justice Matters with your host, Patrick Cullen, President of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association.
We're back here on Justice Matters, and in the second half of this week's episode, we're going to hear from one of the leading voices on labor in the New York State Legislature. He is the chair of the Senate Committee on Civil Service and Pensions, State Senator Andrew Granardis. Senator, welcome to Justice Matters.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, absolutely. It's a pleasure. Before we get into some questions, just introduce yourself to our listeners. The area you represent, and how you got into running for the office you now hold.
Sure. So I was elected last November, so I took office January 1st. So it's my first term in the legislature. I'm born and raised in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and I represent the 22nd district in Brooklyn, which is the neighborhoods of Bay Ridge, Dyker Heights, Bath Beach, Bensonhurst, Gravesend, Homecrest, Midwood, Sheepshead Bay, Manhattan Beach, Garrison Beach, and Marine Park.
Wow.
I've long been active in my community. Prior to my election, I served as the general counsel for the Brooklyn Borough President's Office for 5 years. I worked in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill for a little bit. And I think that running for office and being involved in the political process is one of the biggest and most effective ways to actually get some change done on things that you think really matter. So you look around your neighborhood, you see things that you want to see improved. The way to do that is to get involved, run for office, and to try to fix those problems.
Yeah, just like our first guest, this is a story of, and I think it should be the story going forward for anybody who gets involved. I grew up in this community. I've seen some things I'd like to change, be the change that you want to see happen, right? And so that is, I think, should be the motivation for anybody who's looking to run for office of any kind of office, whether it be a local school board or union or obviously to the level of New York State Legislature. And the district you represent encompasses a large swath of Brooklyn. And I have to tell you, so many of the SCOA's members live in those neighborhoods that you just mentioned. And so not only are you elected and chair of the Senate Committee on Civil Service and Pensions, but you are representing so many of my members directly. And so that's why it's even more of a pleasure to have you on this program to discuss some of the things going forward. So it was your first legislative session from January 1st through the end of June. What did you think?
Wow. I mean, it was, it was actually, I thought it was really, really great. It was a privilege to be able to sit in that chamber and be able to cast votes on issues that directly affect my community or the issues that I'm really passionate about or the work that, comes to my committee, every week that I'm up in Albany. So it really was I think it's a blessing, in fact, that I've been given to have this opportunity. I think we did a lot of great things this year, things that had been blocked for year after year after year. Because of the way that the state legislature was divided on a partisan basis, we were able to do a lot of things that, not just 1 or 2 years, 5, 10, 15, even 20 years in some cases, things that had not been able to get done. So it was arguably the most productive legislative session in New York history. Very busy. You come into office, you're trying to figure out where the bathrooms are, and they're like giving you these bills and say, hey, we're going to vote on this, in a couple of days. Make sure you know it all. And so it came with some challenges, but I think I was up to the task, and I really relished the opportunity to be able to serve that way.
Yeah, that's terrific. And I mean, it can't be easy. It has to be somewhat overwhelming, no matter of your previous experience, to then be in that seat and have to be up to date on so many different varied issues.
So many issues.
I do.
Exactly.
I commend the legislature this year on being able to unblock a lot of what has been blockaded for so long. A lot of things that matter to really, the hardworking men and women of this state for, like you said, decades in some instances. So there really a lot got done, and there were no excuses to not get things done in a way because of the single party rule in Albany. And so when you see so much get done, it restores a little bit of your faith in your elected officials, saying, okay, we're no longer playing this back and forth game, finger pointing, let's get some stuff done. And it was obvious that a lot got done. One of the things that I think was it has always been in and around, I think, the legislative agenda in Albany, the discussion at least, is single payer healthcare, and obviously that did not get done this year as in any way, shape, or form, and I think that going forward it would take really a monumental effort, and so much has to go into it, studies and how it will affect labor unions and private industry and so on, small business owners. How do you see this issue evolving going forward?
That's a great question, and in full disclosure, I'm someone who is generally supportive of the idea. When you look at our healthcare system today, you see so many problems, so many cost overruns, so many issues of people being denied the care they need, having high deductibles, high premiums, surprise billing, confusing billing. Like, the healthcare system is broken, top to bottom. So I think having a system that takes away all of those issues is great, but enacting a single-payer system doesn't come without its challenges, and I think some of the biggest challenges, from my perspective, that I think really need to get fleshed out a lot more and need to come up with answers for are twofold. Number one, how do we ensure that any government-run insurance program will pay doctors enough to keep them in the business of medicine? The New York State Medicaid program notoriously underpays its doctors, and so you have doctors who don't want to participate in the state Medicaid program because they're not being compensated fairly for the services and the health care they're providing. And number two, we have a large public sector workforce in the state that has been able to collectively bargain fair and generous health care benefits, and they do that by giving up some of the salary that they're otherwise entitled to. So if we're going to all of a sudden move to a flat-out single-payer system, we need to find a way to make sure that public sector workers who have already sacrificed something in exchange for good, decent benefits aren't left out, in the cold without just compensation. So I think those are the two issues that I'm going to be, looking to see some resolution on as the debate around single payer continues. But I think if you ask anyone, no one, I've never met a single person that's happy with how the healthcare system operates in their community, in their city, or their state. And so something's got to give somewhere. We have to the question is, how do we do it in the right way?
Yeah, I really agree with you on so many points there, and you're right. I think that the number one thing is, if we're providing something for our citizens, our taxpayers, it has to be effective, it has to be cost efficient, it has to be the right, it has to fit so many different pockets. But I obviously couldn't agree with you more about the fact that public employees have sacrificed a large portion of compensation over the years. How do we make that up? Should this be implemented, even if it's over the course of a period of time? How do we make up for basically lost wages that were given up in place of providing health care, whether it be the city or the state, or no matter what agency you work for? That's a difficult prospect that we're all going to have to come together on, both labor, legislatively, and really by way of public discourse in the community, which I think is, the most important way to hear people is to have hearings. And I think that this is such a monumental issue that it deserves that type of open discourse from every corner of our community. One question I do have with the healthcare issue, though, is so many of our public employees, and you are the chair of the Civil Service and Pensions Committee, do receive their health care from their employer, which is either the city of New York, state of New York. How would single payer work if they move out of New York when they retire?
You see, that's one of the questions that we have to figure out.
Right.
That's one of the the complicating wrinkles in this whole debate that we don't I don't think have a sufficient answer for at this time. And that's why, and to your earlier point, that's the point of the legislative process. Just because someone puts a bill out or writes an idea doesn't mean that it's going to become the law of the land as it's written. I mean, we have a hearing process. We have a way to explore the ramifications of bills. We have an amendment process. We bring stakeholders on the table to iron out all these details. And so right now, the conversation around, single-payer healthcare is going through this process to kind of figure out all of these nitty-gritty things that, weren't thought about when they first proposed the idea, but now, we have to actually reckon with if we're going to try to move this forward. So I think that's one of the big sticking points that still needs an answer, and hopefully we'll get an answer to that, and we'll figure it out if we can even get an answer to that as the bill continues to work its way through the legislative process.
Yeah, and that's been a
hearing. There was either a hearing last week or it's coming up this week up in Rochester. We had a hearing in May up in Albany. So there is it's a slow process, but it's an ongoing process. And, if we haven't gotten an answer at one point, we still have plenty of time to figure out an answer at another point.
Yeah, that's really important to first of all, the fact that there are hearings in places other than either Albany or New York City is really important, because there are so many corners of the state that are seeing things differently these days. And so to hear that there are going to be hearings in places like Rochester and other cities that seem to be off the idea map a lot of the times is really refreshing to hear. It's been a hallmark of my leadership of our union to participate in as many hearings as possible, because that is where, on the record, you can make a point and nobody can take that away from you, I guess is a very simple way of putting it. And so, whether it be single payer or any of the other issues facing our members, but also, just the community in general, the law enforcement community, public safety, the judicial system, hearings are such an important thing, and I relish the ability to sit down and speak at them, because you become a voice for the voiceless, and I think that's why you like you said before, kind of got involved in running for office.
That's exactly right, and you'll notice, this year, with the new Democratic majority in Albany, we have done a much more aggressive job of scheduling hearings and fleshing out a lot of these things. I think the number of oversight hearings that we've had has been significantly greater than what the previous majority had. The number of hearings that we're doing on big bills like this is greater than the previous majority had. So we're taking this responsibility very seriously. I know I certainly am. And so we're going to continue to do that to make sure that we get the best input into all of these ideas to make sure that it actually gets us the results that we want.
Yeah, and we couldn't ask for more than that, right? We couldn't ask for more than the people that are representing us, whether it be a union leader representing workers or it be a legislator representing communities. That's all we can ask for, is be open and be, be listening. If you're not listening, you're talking, and you can't learn anything when you're talking, and that's the way I've always approached things. And I think that
100% right.
I think that the new wave of young new legislators in Albany on both sides of both the Assembly and the Senate have really come to the table with a lot of that mentality, and obviously you're one of them leading the charge, and so we applaud that. If you'll stick with me through a break,
Yep.
I have a few more questions. We'll get into a little bit more of the labor and civil service side of things, and just an overview of what we have coming forward. So if you stick with me, Justice Matters will be right back after this message.
This is Justice Matters with Patrick Cullen, president of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association.
Welcome back to Justice Matters. In our final segment here, we're going to continue our conversation with State Senator Andrew Granardis, representing a large part of Brooklyn, New York. And Senator, welcome back after the break. And just wanted to get into a quick conversation, or not so quick if necessary. But after the Supreme Court ruling in the Janus versus AFSCME case, many unions have been negatively affected throughout the country, really. The New York State legislature in the past has helped unions by passing legislation that mandates an opportunity to sign up new employees. Do you think the legislature can help in other ways to ensure New York State maintains a strong union state?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, one of the things we did just last year in the budget was we protected members' information from being disclosed publicly through FOIL requests. This way, these outside groups that are anti-labor and anti-union, what they were trying to do was get lists of all employees and then reach out to them directly and tell them not to participate in their union any longer.
Yes.
We've protected that information. We've made it private. So this way, we're not going to have these predatory, anti-labor folks coming in from out of state. Some of them are across the country. They're these billionaires who own these mega conglomerates,
right,
trying to tell our workers why their union is bad for them, and they're full of it because they're wrong. And so that was, I think, a really significant step. And, more broadly, New York is a labor state. It's a labor town.
Yep.
And I can't ever imagine a future where organized labor on both the public and private side is not a significant part of the state's workforce as well as political process. So we're going to do anything we can to keep making sure that we can keep unions strong and vibrant in the state.
Yeah, I think that, first of all, I know that there's a big hullabaloo in Alaska about legislation that's been submitted to force people to opt in every year and things like that. So there, the legislature is working against labor. In New York, it's the opposite. I think I view us as partners, both labor and legislation, almost on everything. Maybe not every single thing, but almost everything. And, that partnership permeates throughout the country. And I think so many labor groups throughout the country of every type of career and profession you can think of look to New York as an example. And if we continue that partnership and we continue to work together and not against one another and not for self-interests and things like that, we really will continue to, I think, be the shining star of how labor and management and the state and city all work together. And so I couldn't agree with you more. As the next legislative session commences in a few months, and can you give us an overview of some of the hot button issues the Senate may be taking up as they relate to both labor and particularly law enforcement?
Sure. Yeah. So, I think a lot of the agenda is still being set for next year. But there are definitely some issues that are going to come up that I think did not come up this past year. The first and foremost among those would be the debate around repeal or reform, take your pick, of 50A, which shields disciplinary records, law enforcement disciplinary records. There's a hearing by the Codes Committee this Thursday in New York City, which I will be attending. I sit on the Codes Committee, and I'll be participating in that hearing on the bill or on the proposal to fully repeal 50A. That's going to be a big fight next year, I anticipate, I imagine. That did not come up this year, and I can see that being ripe for at least further consideration by the legislature in the year ahead. I think from my perspective, one of the things that I'm going to be trying to focus on is, we always talk about the pension side of the Civil Service and Pensions Committee, and that's really important. We want to make sure that we protect those pensions and, keep those pennies in our members' pockets. But we don't talk as much about the civil service side, I think. And one of the things I'm going to be doing in the next couple of weeks is I'm going to be touring the state to visit with different public sector workers, teachers, corrections officers, court officers, you name it. Firefighter, the whole gamut, just to hear from members directly as to how, what challenges they're facing in their workplace, what issues they're confronting, how their job is going, how else we can be supporting them. And I want to take all of that information, and I want to be able to help inform how I'm able to manage my committee next year, and think about ways that we can either propose new legislation to help fix some of the issues we identify, or at least have a better understanding of what's going on out there, so we can all talk more intelligently when we're debating these bills or considering different proposals or talking about the budget, how it actually going to impact our workers. So I'm going to be busy doing a lot of that, and I think that'll make me a better chairman of my committee next year by having a deeper understanding of that.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I can't help but applaud the, the initiative taken to, not listen. I mean, you're in it for all the right reasons, as you've told us earlier. Some may not be. You're taking this as a full-time job, and you're, traveling the state, and you're going to hear from probably, an immensely diverse group of individuals, and try and gather as much information as you can to try and, like you said, be more of an effective chairman of what we view as, as important a committee in Albany as there exists. And I'd be happy to, navigate you through the court system to hear from as many people as possible, if that's something that interests you as well.
Yeah, that's terrific.
Yeah, and so again, what can you say bad about what you just said? Really, looking at learn more, hear from people, and I mean, what more can you say about that? There's can't take an adverse stance on that, and if you do, it's it doesn't have the best interests at heart. One of the you're a co-sponsor of our accidental disability bill that has passed unanimously for, I believe, the 6th year now through both houses, co-sponsored by Assemblyman Peter Abate, also from Brooklyn. We have consistently submitted this bill, and this particular time, although being your first time sponsoring it as your first legislative session, we took the previous veto messages and we tried to write the bill a little differently so that it would obey the governor's veto message. It's just such an important. It's such an important bill because if somebody gets hurt accidentally at work, they really, so many other of our brothers and sisters in uniform throughout the city, throughout the state, are taken care of if they can no longer work because of an accident. And I just, I appreciate your co-sponsorship. And if you wanted to just talk to the merits of that bill here to let our members know the support it has.
Absolutely. And before I took this job, I was previously a trustee on behalf of the borough president on the NYSERS board. And one of the things I had to do as a trustee was hear all of the accidental disability appeal cases. So we'd have these members come in and they talk about how they were injured on the job because of something that happened, a workplace condition, and how they were not able to work anymore and how they should have been entitled to, their disability pension. So I've spent 5 years listening to these stories. I know how hard it is for members who are injured on the job, who, put themselves on the line every single day in both a law enforcement and non-law enforcement capacity, to serve the city that they love, to serve the state that they love. And they should be treated fairly and compensated fairly if they're injured on the job while they're doing that. So, you're right. We did retool the bill this year, working with Assembly Member Abadi. Very hopeful that we're able to get it signed by the governor this year. We've made a big push, made a big request that he considers the legislation, and I'm cautiously optimistic. I think making those changes should help. It doesn't really add a lot of cost, doesn't really change much. It
doesn't. Yeah,
make sure that we take care of members who are hurt while doing the job that we're asking them to do.
Absolutely.
If we're asking them to put themselves on the line, we should be willing to stand by them, right behind them. God forbid something should happen to them. So. If we don't get it passed this year, I'm not going to stop trying to get it passed. I think it's really important.
Yeah, it truly is. And I have, had many conversations with the high-ranking officials at the Office of Court Administration who have confirmed to me that they will write a memo of support in this year, that this goes to the governor at some point now before the end of the year. And so we're hopeful that helps inform the governor of the agency's support of this initiative as well. Before we get going, where can we find out some more information about, what you're doing, your community website, Facebook, those types of things?
Yeah, Facebook. We're very active on social media, Facebook, Twitter, everything. Everything's at A Gounardes. So it's my letter A and then my last name, GOUNARDES. I have two websites. I have a Senate website, which is gounardes.nysenate.gov, and then I have andrewgounardes.com as well, which is separate. And we're just I'm trying to be out here and do the best I can to just talk to as many people in my district or people who I represent through the committee, and learn as much as I can to help folks, and then go up to Albany and help as many people as I can. If I end a day where I feel like I'm not helping someone, then I'm doing something wrong. And so for me, that's really the biggest test when I go home every night. Who have I helped today? And if I have at least one person that I can name, then I know it was a good day. And I want to keep doing that for as long as I can.
That's a great outlook, and really can't help but support that. Thank you for coming on the show today. I think we could probably keep going on so many more issues. So I'd love to have you back on again, and we thank you for all that you do.
Anytime. Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Senator. So we're so happy to have brought Justice Matters back here to AM 970, The Answer. And, we're going to have a few more weeks of shows here. And I think next week we're going to have some of our partners in the media to discuss some labor issues, some criminal justice issues, the reforms and things like that. Down the line, we're hopeful to have some of our brethren from other unions, especially law enforcement unions, to discuss the challenges we face. We're going to have some new and interesting guests otherwise from the legal profession and things related to our court system. So we're really looking forward to this next round of shows here on Justice Matters. I thank you for joining us. Remember, the show is for our members, about our members, and I want to hear from you if you like the show or if you don't like the show. Either way, I'm going to listen. You can find me and contact me at Cullen, CULLEN, at nysscoa.org. We'll be back next week with another episode of Justice Matters, but I do want to end this show dedicating it to two of our active members who we've lost in the last couple of months, Court Officer Ida Brando and Court Officer Brian McLaughlin. We hope your families find solace. We hope you rest in peace, and we love you, and we thank you for spending so much of your life bringing us joy. Until next week, Justice matters. Thank you.